Jorge Joestar, Chapter 1, Sukumajuku. My name is Jorge Joestar. The name was taken by my aristocratic grandfather, but written the Spanish style. I asked why Mum didn't spell it George like a proper English name, but she just smiled and said, "Well, you were born in the Canary Islands, and if I named you George, we couldn't very well call you Jojo, could we?" My father, he died in a shipwreck, was named Jonathan Joestar, and had gone his whole life by the nickname Jojo. He died so soon after their wedding that Mum, still deeply in love with him, had her heart set on my inheriting that nickname. Sadly, only Spaniards lived on La Palma, and nobody ever called me Jojo. Mum and Lisa called me George, and everyone pronounced my name the Spanish way, Jorge. Pointing this out to Mum just made her look sad, so I held my tongue. Frankly, what they called me was the least of my problems. For as long as I could remember, I was tormented by Spanish-speaking jackanapes. This very day they'd rubbed dog shit on my face on the way home from school. They'd managed to get some up my nose, and no matter how much I washed my face, the stink remained. But they'd been trying to make me eat it, so I guess I got off easy. Like she always did, Lisa found us and saved me before they could force the shit all the way in. These pigs were born on the island and would die a useless death here. They had no conscience, no capacity for anything like abstract thought, and thus no notion of restraint. "You got saved by a girl again, Bolsa Blanca. Your dick wouldn't even work as an oar." Lisa had knocked him down and kicked him a number of times, and his nose was still bleeding. But Antonio Torres was getting used to the beatings, and didn't let them get in the way of a good jeer. This hit me where it hurt. After the shipwreck, Mum spent several days adrift on the Pacific with me and Lisa, so Antonio and his gang had started calling me Bolsa Blanca, but this insulted Mum and my dead dad as well, so I always got mad and cried. Look, even I hated myself for it. I was such a damn crybaby. It was like I had just served them all dessert. The moment I started crying, they all killed themselves laughing, and Lisa had to drag me away. "Come on, George, you can't cry like that. Now they've gone home happy." Lisa was furious with me. I was in the river, trying to wash the smell off, and this wasn't helping. The snot and tears made my cheeks sting, but Elizabeth Straits showed no mercy. "Your face is filthy. Washing isn't helping. You're so pathetic I don't even want to be seen walking with you. If you're so sad, then go cry alone. I can't bear watching." She turned and left me there. This made me feel even more sorry for myself. What did I ever do to deserve this? Because I was the only English boy in class. I hate to bring race into this, but all of us were white. We had an Asian kid in our class, but nobody ever made fun of him. Damn it. Why did they all pick on me? Obviously because I was a crybaby, not particularly smart, not particularly athletic, and not particularly funny. The Asian kid was unflappable, quite good looking, got straight A's, and word was he worked as a detective in elementary school. Someone like that just isn't going to get picked on. But knowing there was a reason why they came after me just made things worse. And now I was crying again. I was still crying when I got home, and Mum said Lisa had gone straight to her room and shut the door. She was crying, you know. Lisa's very worried about you, George. Such a kind soul." For a moment I thought she meant me. I supposed I was on the kind side for a boy. Then I realised she meant Lisa and got very confused. There must be some mistake. Kind? How? Violent, and sure, she saved me from the bullies, but afterwards she always yelled at me a lot, and after she got done yelling she'd walk away and leave me on my own. What about that was so kind? I was still fuming about that when we sat down to dinner, so Mum fixed me with a stern look. "George, we have something important to talk about tonight. Will you listen?" There was a sadness to her smile that was very worrying, and I felt tears welling up reflexively. "No," I said. "Don't be so dumb, George," Lisa laughed. "She hasn't even said anything yet." I turned to scowl at her for laughing, but she wasn't smiling at all. She looked really tense, and that really made me scared. "What was going on?" "Listen, George," Mum said. "Look at me." I really didn't want to, but I had no choice. This was clearly important. I had to face it. "What?" She spoke slowly. "A long time ago it was decided that Lisa was to go stay with her adopted father Straits when she turns 12. The three of us will celebrate Christmas together, and then Straits will come to pick her up at the start of the year. Lisa will go with him to his home in Italy." What? This was genuinely so far beyond all the bad news I had been bracing myself for that I actually blacked out for a second. Lisa had been protecting me my entire life, since I was a baby. She'd step in if someone hit me, get back what they took, give me hers or split hers with me if I dropped something, comforted me when I was crying, praised me if I did something right. There was no way they could take Lisa away from me now. But, I said, if Lisa leaves, I don't know what'll happen to me. Actually, I was pretty sure I did know what would happen to me. They'd kill me, for real. But Mum had no idea how bad things were for me. The tone she took was devoid of any comfort or reassurance. George, you have to become strong enough, smart enough and resilient enough to survive after Lisa leaves. You have to live without her help, and you have 6 months to prove you can. I know she's been a great help to you. Proving you can stand on your own 2 feet is the best thing you can do to repay her. What? God, Mum was the best at, how could I put it? She had a way of saying things that was so right you couldn't argue, couldn't make excuses, and couldn't disobey without feeling like you were a very bad boy. But I was in such a fix that I didn't see how I could do the right thing. They nearly shoved dog shit in my mouth. Today, just hours ago. Lisa was saving me from such dire straits on a daily basis. That's a pun because they're Jojo characters. Mum had no idea. Mum had no idea she had no idea. In a state of panic, I was about to cast aside all pretense of pride as a gentleman and use the dog shit as an example of just how bad this was when Lisa started crying. George, you idiot. Can't you think about anyone but yourself? I have to go live with my dad, who I barely even remember. I'll barely ever see you or Mama Erina again. I'm so scared and I'll miss you, and here you are just... To hell with you, George! She let the tears stream down her cheeks, making no effort to wipe them away, sobbing loudly. I stared, stunned. I'd never seen Lisa cry before. Mum stood up, walked around the table, and put her arms around Lisa. Oh, Mama Erina, where? I'm sorry. I can't stop crying. I didn't want to cry, I swore I wouldn't. Go ahead, Lisa. Cry as much as you need. It's a very sad thing. It's hard for me as well. We've lived together your whole life, and it's been such fun. We've been so happy. I've grown to love you like my own daughter, and I promise that will never change. Remember that always, Lisa. Know that I'll always love you. Oh, Mama Erina, thank you for everything. I love you too. I love you. Remember me forever. Don't forget about me. Of course not. How could I forget you? You're my pride and joy. I should be thanking you. George and I have both treasured your company. I don't want to go. I want to live here with you forever. I'm sorry, I know it's selfish of me, but that's how I feel. And you shouldn't be ashamed of that. Poor Lisa. Your life upturned by a promise grown-ups made for you. But you have an important duty. This promise was made knowing the fate of all mankind depended on it. I'm sure someday you'll come to understand, even if it's hard to accept while you're still so very young. But if you try, you'll get through this. Oh, no, I don't wanna. With Mum's arms still around her, Lisa began thrashing around like a toddler throwing a tantrum. I sat watching this, surprised, and more than a little nonplussed. Wow, I thought. Lisa's just a kid. I'd never noticed before. But of course she was. She was 11. Technically at the moment I was the same age as her. It had always felt like she was a grown-up looking after me. But she was less than a year older. Last year, she'd been only 10 years old all those times she saved me. And now that I was 11, I should be able to protect last year's version of me. Antonio and his friends had bullied me last year as well, but Antonio a year ago was much smaller than he was now, and not nearly as strong. But I was scared. Scared, but I could probably still take him. I was just scared. If I could just stop being scared, I could knock him down. The only way to stop being scared was to start being brave. I was a boy and couldn't keep relying on a girl my whole life. Okay, Lisa. The panic was gone, and I sounded calm, or like I was trying to sound calm. My lips were still quivering, but I forced myself to keep talking. I'll be brave. Starting tomorrow, I'll beat up Antonio myself. That might not actually happen, but I'll think of something. I won't need your help. I smiled at her. Now it was her turn to gape at me. Even Mum looked surprised and maybe a little dismayed. Neither of them believed me. Why should they? But Lisa blinked her red eyes and a smile spread across her wet cheeks. Thank you, George. That was wonderful. I suddenly realised just how pretty Lisa was. It was like her whole body was sparkling, and I felt me heart skip a beat. But don't try too hard. I don't want you getting hurt, she added. Yep, nobody believed in me. But I had to try. I spent all night trying to figure out how to avoid Antonio's gang on the road to and from school, and trying to think of snappy comebacks. Quite a step down from what I'd said at dinner, but all my plans were for naught. Antonio Torres was found dead in the morning. He'd been murdered. Since I was trying not to meet Antonio's gang on their way in from the harbour, and trying not to need Lisa's protection, I'd gone to school very early. Instead of leaving my satchel in the classroom, I hid in a storage room around back of the school, waited for everyone else to arrive and slipped into class at the last possible second. This was pathetic, but that was the best I could manage that morning. But as I stealthily opened the door and made a dash for my seat at the back, I became aware of a bizarre silence. He said it. He said bizarre. He said it. These clowns were always yelling about something. Why were they quiet today? Still hunched over, I looked up. Everyone was looking at me. I froze in my tracks. The looks they gave me were not the usual mix of pity and scorn reserved for the class outcast. Instead, I saw fear and anxiety, and above all, suspicion. For reasons even I wasn't clear on, I immediately looked for Antonio Torres. He wasn't there, but his bannermen were all glaring at me. Oi, Jorge! His first mate, Julio, snarled. What are you skulking about for? Where have you been, you limey bastard? Huh? What are you talking about? I came to school like always. I couldn't very well say I'd been hiding in the storage room. Liar! Julio yelled. I went to your house this morning. I ran straight there. You were already gone at 7. Huh? Why'd you go to my house? Was he planning on tormenting me there too? Please, no. That would be the last straw. Surely that was against the rules. What Julio said next I did not expect. I wanted to see if you knew anything about Antonio's death. Antonio's death? What? That piece of shit was dead? What are you talking about? Then why did you lie? You didn't come to school like always. I mean, I did come here a little early. No, you didn't. You went and murdered Antonio. Wait, what? What are you talking about? Antonio was murdered? Don't play innocent. No, I seriously have no idea what's going on. How could I possibly kill Antonio? Not alone, Julio roared, his eyes gleaming with rage and fear. But if Lisa helped... Lisa wouldn't kill anyone, I yelled back. This was the first time I'd ever raised my voice to Julio. It made him jump, and he hesitated a moment before answering. Then where was Lisa this morning? When I went to your house, Miss Violence was missing too. Huh? Your mom was having fits. Neither you nor that girl were in your rooms. You're telling me that both of you just happened to disappear the morning Antonio was murdered? I don't believe that for a second. You did something to him. I told your mother if Antonio's been killed, then you too must have done it. What? You said that to my mum? You dick. You don't even have any proof. Nobody but you and the girl that protects you would ever want to kill him. What are you talking about? I couldn't even begin to kill him. I don't have the balls to fight him. I was trying to avoid seeing him, so I came to school early and hid in the storage room until class started. This admission was so pathetic and so like something I would do that everyone but Julio let out a relieved titter. Can you prove that? Julio demanded, despite having provided no evidence to back up his own accusations. I can, Mr. Hernandez said, stepping in the door. I saw him from the teacher's room. Saw him go in the storage room and come out. Julio, don't go accusing your classmates without reason. Judging from George's behaviour and what you two just said, it sounds like you kids have been bullying George. You, Antonio, and the rest of you, all ganging up on him. You should be ashamed of yourselves, hear? Julio turned red, grit his teeth, and stared at the ground. I was pleased he'd finally noticed, but he couldn't have done it sooner. This was exactly why I had never expected help from him. Julio wasn't quite done yet, though. We still don't know where Lisa is, do we? With Mr. Hernandez watching, I was a little more confident. I allowed myself a theatrical sigh before answering. Listen to yourself. Lisa would never do something like this. She may be good at fighting, but she's a girl. She can never kill Antonio. Bullshit, Julio howled. She's no ordinary girl. You don't know, 'cause she's never hit you, but we all know. Her punches and kicks aren't normal. It's like electric running through you. It feels like your blood's running the wrong direction. She's got some weird power. She used her freaky power to kill Antonio. That's why he died so weird. 'Cause of that freak. Huh? He'd lost me entirely. Maybe you should calm down. Lisa doesn't have any power. Wink, wink. She does, and you just don't know it. She kicked me once, and my entire left side wouldn't stop trembling for hours. She punched Antonio the other days, and his legs started running on their own. He ran 10 kilometers non-stop, all the way to the beach, right into the water, nearly drowned. What? That's impossible. Whatever. You don't know. Useless talking to you. Point is, Lisa has some weird power. And you need some weird power to kill Antonio like that. What do you mean? How was Antonio killed? You already know. Fine. Be that way. You see? Julio paused dramatically. Antonio was crushed to death, leaving him flat as a sheet of paper. Right behind his house. No blood. No muscles. No bones. Nothing left of him but a sheet of skin. What the hell? Was that really how Antonio Torres had died? If that was real, I definitely couldn't see Lisa being capable of that. But while I was still stunned, the classroom door suddenly slammed open. I've been eavesdropping, and I hate to admit it, because it does so spoil an entrance. But it's the truth. Everyone seemed so worked up I hesitated to enter. But not only did class never start, the discussion grew increasingly bizarre. Eventually it defeated even my patience. The boy at the door had a long thick tube of some sort held under his arm. It was none other than the lone Asian in the class, Kato, the most handsome, most intelligent, most bizarre boy in class. When he walked in, everyone, including the teacher, paid attention. He had that air about him. Everyone watched as Suku shut the door behind him, made his way to his desk, planted the case on the floor and turned to face us. I could have sworn I just solved the Antonio Torres case. So why do I get the sense it's only just begun? We all gasped. Solved it? Julius shrieked. What a load of crap. We found Antonio's body and the police had only just arrived when we left. That was less than an hour ago. You're not a cop. How would you even know he was dead? And here you are claiming to have solved the case. 'Cause I did. Suku said. But how? Julius said, at a loss for words. You know that. Because I'm a detective, Julio Gonzalez. I happened to pass the Torres residence mere moments after you came bursting out of it. Some would say fate brought me there, he added cryptically. Suku turned to look at me, but it seems fate is leading me in a different direction. As I stood my ground against his piercing stare, I wondered how he could speak in such a grown-up mannered fashion. Was he really 11? No. He hadn't had a birthday yet, so he was only 10. Then it struck me. This was the first time I'd ever talked to him face to face. I said, my voice shaking. So you solved the murder of Antonio Torres? Was Lisa involved? So I thought. Past tense? So you didn't? Instead of answering, he asked, George, have you ever read a detective novel? A detective novel? I think we have some in the house, but it's a genre of novels that began about 60 years ago in 1841, when the American writer Edgar Allan Poe published a story called The Murders in the Rue Morgue. The salient points of the genre, obviously, are that the murder appears to be impossible, and is then solved by a genius detective. Obviously? How would I know that? My mum said they weren't for children to read. I don't like scary books anyway, what's your point? But you understand the concept of a detective. Like Sherlock Holmes? Exactly. A fictional device. A role destined to always arrive at the truth in the end. So? That's me. Okay? So what? A detective surveys all evidence, understands the case in full, and at last arrives at a perfect solution. Looked at the other way, when new evidence comes to light providing details previously unknown, that solution is no longer perfect, and an imperfect solution is not the truth. What the hell was this Asian on about? Suko stood up and began moving around the classroom, closing the curtains. A new world lies before us, he announced. Facts previously hidden from view. My solution was not complete. I was wrong. The case is not done. With each of these last exclamations, he swished the curtain closed. In the darkened classroom with all eyes on him, he returned to his desk and picked up the tube he'd brought with him. This is very sensitive to sunlight and dry air, he explained, and pulled something out of it. He rolled it out on the desk. It was Antonio Torres, only flat. Holes where his eyes should be. Totally naked. Flat. Like paper. No blood, no muscle, no bones, nothing left of him but a sheet of skin. The very boy who said this let out a shriek of horror. What's wrong with you? Why would you bring a classmate's corpse here? The cops are going to be pissed. Oh God! Oh God! Suku didn't bat an eye. I asked permission to keep it as a souvenir, and I granted this as an award for solving the case. No one will scold me for it. The flat Antonio Torres spread out on the desk had his chin up and turned slightly to the side, his eyes partly opened. He had no eyeballs, but it made him look like he was staring into the distance, lost in thought. His hands were held up in front of him, like he was trying to cover his bare chest, or trying to push something painful away. His hips were swiveled to one side as if trying to hide his little penis, and his knees and ankles and toes were all curled as well, like he was dancing. He'd been tormenting me on a daily basis for years, but this was beautiful. Are you sure it's not a painting? I said. That is the solution I arrived at, George. Or should I say, Jorge Joestar? What are you talking about? That's his body, it's fucking gross, Julia wailed. Suku nodded. That too is correct. But it's not the whole truth. A stir went through the room, but by this time we were all under Suku's spell. This is a work of art created by Antonio's mother, Maria Torres. She made it by peeling off her son's skin. The bones and blood and flesh were not removed. Rather, the skin alone was peeled away, carefully placed together with adhesive, and hair shed over the past few months placed carefully on the head to complete the full body work of art. This year's Antonio, she called it. This was too much for all of us. I nearly forgot to breathe. His voice shaking, Julio asked, But if his skin was peeled off, wouldn't Antonio die? Normally, yes, if it was all done at once, Suku said, not at all perturbed. So at first, she would peel it away bit by bit, treat it with oil and sew the pieces together with very fine thread. But the result was rather patchwork, and the lines where it was sewn tended to bunch up, and it was obvious which pieces of skin had been harvested freshly. Early versions weren't what you call beautiful. Maria adapted her technique, and her son's body adapted to survive it. Julio swallowed. You mean there's more than one? Yes. She's been making one a year since Antonio was a baby. So including this year's, there are 12 in all. The early ones are not well done, but starting with last year's, they became rather remarkable. This year's in particular is a bona fide masterpiece. With Julio at a loss for words, someone else mumbled, So horrible. His own mum. How could she? It's unnatural. Her love for her son was hardly natural, Suku said. Since the invention of the photograph, Kodak cameras have become readily available. La Palma may not have a camera shop, but there's one in Santa Cruz de Tenerife. But Maria wanted the skin. It was the texture she loved, I suppose. No photograph can preserve that. Before the police took her away, Maria ran her cheek against it, desperately trying to savour her last moments with her art. I could hear several of my classmates throwing up, their vomit splattering on the floor, yet those next to them failed to react in any way. I was staring closely at this year's Antonio, but I couldn't see any sewing or patches at all. Were they on the inside? But I didn't dare touch it to see. It's beautiful, isn't it? Suku said, standing beside me. There's only one seam in it, running down his back from his neck to his rear. Huh? But isn't this a skin quilt? A quilt. That's one way of putting it. But that only applies to the early ones. Like I said, She improved her technique, and her son's body adapted to it. Every summer his mother would peel off his skin. Even if she was careful not to peel enough to kill him, stripping random pieces off would have been very painful. He needed some defense against this. All cells in the human body are replaced every 7 years, but our skin is replaced once a month. And in Antonio Torres' case, 3 days before June 16th, Maria's customary skinning day, his skin cell production would speed up. All Maria needed to do was make a single incision along his back, and Antonio could slip out of his old skin. His new skin would be thin, but fully grown. He could shed his old skin like a snake. Then Maria would apply a thick coating of oil to the cast-off skin, inside and out, to prevent it drying out, and seal the rear incision with medical adhesive. That's how this year's Antonio was made, he said, like a waiter explaining a recipe. So the real Antonio Torres is still alive? I asked. If this wasn't a corpse, but a cast-off skin, then the rest of Antonio must be somewhere, and I would have to form a new strategy for avoiding him. Sukumajuku sighed awkwardly. I assumed he was. He turned to face the classroom door. You may enter, he said. May? Quite the haughty choice of words. I turned to look at the door as it opened. Antonio Torres was standing there, expressionless. His comrade Julio took a step forward to greet him. But, wait! Stay back! Suku's bark was so loud Julio jumped and froze in his tracks. I was certainly on edge at being seemingly confronted by a not-so-dead Antonio, but at the same time, something seemed wrong. Antonio usually laughed raucously, talked down to me, his friends and grown-ups, bossing everyone around. He was always on the move, never settling down, his eyes sending sharp glances in all directions. Now he just stood there in the door, vacantly, doing nothing. I'd never seen him so still. Normally Antonio would have burst in the door, and he would never have waited outside, even if Suku ordered him to. But here he was, standing silently, not moving at all. Even as I wondered, Suku said, You didn't say a single word to me on the way to school, Antonio. I assumed you were in shock. Your mother had just been arrested after all. But I was wrong, wasn't I? I thought you smelled a little ripe, but good manners prevented me saying anything. This too was a mistake. Were there, in fact, 2 versions of this year's Antonio? The thing standing there was not Antonio alive. I knew that. Antonio would never act like this. Would the person inside kindly step out? Suku said. The rest of the class finally realized the thing in front of us was someone else wearing Antonio's skin. Julio and his cronies all took a big step back. I have a very good sense of smell. Despite the stench of the skin, I can clearly smell the shampoo you've used, Suku said. I can't name the brand, but it's the same shampoo Jorge Joestar uses. Huh? What? I stammered. Antonio Torres sighed. There are things you're better off not knowing, detective, a girl's voice said. A voice I knew. I didn't want to frighten the children, she said. Antonio's black back split open, and Elizabeth Straits emerged from within. Ah! The whole class screamed. I couldn't scream. As she came out of Antonio's skin, Lisa looked so beautiful. Even more beautiful than I'd thought the night before. Wow, Lisa really is amazing, I thought. A strange realization that left me weirdly calm. Suku said nothing, but his eyes shone with keen interest, watching her closely. She tossed Antonio Torres aside, wearing nothing but a corset and her underwear, nearly naked but not at all embarrassed. She seemed supremely comfortable. She was like the woman in the theatre or printed advertisements, just smaller and not yet as curvy. What's going on here? Everyone stay quiet, I'll take care of this, Mr. Hernandez said, and went out into the brightly lit hall. Lisa ignored him. She pulled her dress out of Antonio's bag and put it on. My name is Elizabeth Straits, she said. I'm a student at this school, a year ahead of you. What I'm about to say is very important. The person who murdered Antonio Torres is hiding somewhere nearby. The police and militia are searching for him, but we will need all of your help. We won't ask you to do anything difficult or dangerous. Quite the opposite. For your own safety, follow these simple instructions to the letter. First, you will all be summoned into the yard, where they will explain exactly what I'm about to say. From there you must go straight home. Don't stop to play, and make sure you pick a route that will keep you in direct sunlight the entire way. You are not to stop anywhere. Don't go in any shops, don't go to your friends' homes, don't step in the shade of any trees, and avoid going near the coast at all costs. I say this because we know the killer will be hiding in the shadows during the day. To remain safe, it's important that you all remain in the sunlight and go straight home. Whatever you see, and whoever invites you to join them, pay no attention. Just go home. Lisa had her fist held out in front of her, her index finger raised. We listened in silence, but the meaning of her words were lost on us. The heat of summer was finally dying down, and all of us wanted to play outside. I had to avoid the main play spots like the park or the beach for fear of bullies, but even so I wanted to at least go to the library or candy store. But Lisa raised another finger, oblivious to our discontent. Secondly, once you have reached your homes, without ever leaving the sunlight, lock all the doors and windows. Don't step outside again. If anyone knocks, do not open the doors. Don't even answer. Sit absolutely still, not making a sound until they give up and go away. No matter how well you know them. No matter how rude you feel this is. Today alone, you must do this. The police have given everyone these same instructions, so anyone knocking should know better. Today is a day when nobody except your family is allowed inside your homes. Today you must all play quietly at home. Except if the doors and windows were all shut, it would get unbearably hot. And staying at home sounded very boring. Others in the class were starting to grumble, but Lisa ignored them. Third, once the sun goes down, let no one in, not even family. If anyone fails to get home before sundown, then gather in the centre of the house with everyone who did come home and hide. If the missing people or anyone else arrive, don't speak to them. Don't answer if they call. Stay hidden till morning. Once the sun has fully risen, sneak out of the house and go to the police station or find a policeman or militiaman patrolling. Lisa now had 3 fingers raised, and her orders were becoming so unreasonable the grumbling grew louder. Be quiet and listen, Lisa snapped. Everyone shut up instantly. Fourth, she said, raising her last finger. At some point this evening, you may hear a commotion from a house near yours. Loud voices, sounds of fighting, even screams. Don't go and see what's going on. If you hear strange sounds or voices, do exactly as I said before. Hide in the centre of the house with your family and wait for morning. Don't speak to anyone. Don't make any sound. Wait for sunrise. What was going to happen tonight? As the meaning of Lisa's instructions settled in, panic spread. Some of the girls started to cry. Are you done? Suku asked. He'd been listening attentively this whole time. Yes. So, someone murdered Antonio Torres. This someone is weak to sunlight, but once the sun has set, there is a strong chance they will attack others at random, he said, summing up the facts. Now I was starting to get scared. Tonight was going to be really scary. Lisa is super cool, but also super vague, and not exactly building my confidence. So what are you? Suku asked. Since this year's Antonio is here, the skin you wore must be Antonio Torres' actual corpse. Ugh, I didn't want to believe it. I looked down at the skin on the floor. Why would she do something so horrible? You made it look as if Antonio Torres was still alive. Not for my benefit, Suku continued. You were trying to catch the killer's attention and confuse him. Yes, and not just that. You were also trying to lure him out of hiding. Exactly. That it appears to be working. Your sunlight-hating killer is already here. Lisa turned, following his gaze. The hallway had been drenched in sunlight a minute ago, but was now dark and gloomy. The curtains had been pulled. We could hear the sound of more curtains being pulled down the hall. As scared as I was, somehow I found myself opening the door and looking out into the hall. The man closing all the curtains was Mr. Hernandez. Why would he... Mr. Hernandez! I called. He stopped in the sunlight, his hand on a curtain, and turned towards me. There were cracks running across his face. Pieces of it were crumbling away. There was a big hole in his forehead. The girls behind me began to shriek. Mr. Hernandez! What's going on? He closed the curtain. As he moved into the sunlight to close the next, his face crumbled further. Not just his head, his entire body was crumbling away. This wasn't weak to sunlight. The sun was killing him. As we watched him close the curtains, Suku spoke to Lisa. So Antonio really did have his blood and flesh and bones sucked out. Now what exactly could do that to him? I was working on the assumption that nobody could. But that simply means no human could. But that assumption was wrong, wasn't it? We're not dealing with a human. Let me ask again. You summoned this thing here. So what are you? What power do you have? I turned to look at her. I didn't know this, Lisa. She looked right at me. Since I was a tiny baby, I've been able to breathe in a special way. Just like my adopted father. And your father, George. What? I asked. I never heard of this before. As a baby, I found myself in a situation even more dangerous than this one. I think I chose to learn how to breathe like this to protect myself. Breathe how? My breathing gives me power, George. I promise I'll protect you. This made no sense, but she flashed a smile at me and stepped past me into the hall. The last curtain had been drawn, and the hall was shrouded in darkness. Mr. Hernandez stood perfectly still, clutching the last curtain. He was clearly no longer alive. His head was completely gone, his left arm had fallen off, his wrist had crumbled, and his guts fallen on the floor, and the rest of him was crumbling into dust. He was dead, and he'd been dead the whole time he was closing the curtains. I had no idea how this could be. But I knew Mr. Hernandez had been human when he was with us, and I knew he had been desperate to close those curtains, but closing the curtains had killed him, so I'd been closing those for someone else, someone who hated sunlight, who had killed Mr. Hernandez and forced him to make a path. I'd never imagined anything like this possible, but I knew it was true. George, take a few steps back, please, Lisa said, staring into the darkness. If you get too close, you'll get shocked. Oh? I took a step back, but Suku stood his ground. When I glanced at him, he said, Experience is everything. I was scared, but I couldn't tear my eyes off Lisa. He's here, she said, her eyes narrowing. Hmm? Suku said, peering into the depths of the hall. Did Antonio have an older brother? No. What are you... There's a young man who looks like Antonio Torres standing on the ceiling. What? I wanted to see, but I wasn't going out there. I couldn't move a muscle. Senorita, a voice said, apparently addressing Lisa. The voice had a strange sweetness to it that made me feel dizzy. Have you seen my son? Son? He's all right looking, but such an awful brat. I didn't like his guts, so I ate him whole, but then I heard he went to school this morning. I know he can't be alive, so this is quite odd. He ate him. I looked down at the floor where Antonio's skin lay. You mean the little turd that picked on my brother? Lisa said. Her voice was trembling. Don't worry, he's dead. Is he? Was I mistaken? I think he's better off dead. I mean, his mother's a pervert who enjoyed peeling his skin off, and his father's such a terrible dad he ate his own son. Dying must have been a relief. The man fell silent, but I heard a sound. Alejandro Torres, if you had been a better father, my precious Jorge Joestar might never have been tormented by your piece of shit son. You'll pay the price for that. Suddenly I remembered the promise I'd made last night. The only way to stop being scared was to start being brave. I was a boy and couldn't keep relying on a girl my whole life. Yet here I was, cowering behind Lisa's back. That sound again, inhaling through his nose. He spoke. You shouldn't talk to grown-ups like that, young lady. Lisa snorted. First you go skulking around pretending to be Spanish, now you're pretending to be a gentleman? Stupid. Her voice was still trembling. I was sure her whole body was shaking like a leaf. But she was facing him, conquering her fear. All I was doing was trembling. Nothing else. I was letting her do everything. Shut that filthy little mouth! I am going to empty out your guts next. the man screamed. Footsteps coming down the ceiling. Lisa took a quick deep breath and started running. No, it was my turn. I ran after her. Wait, don't be stupid, Suku called after me, but I didn't stop. I raced down the hall, chasing after Lisa. Her back looked so small, her shoulders so frail, I had to get in front of her. The young man on the ceiling definitely looked just like Antonio Torres, but there were long pointy teeth sticking out of his open mouth, threatening Lisa. I'm gonna eat you right up, little girl. Laughing wildly, his feet left the ceiling. He spun in midair, lunging towards Lisa. I am Jorge Joestar's guardian. I fight to protect his beautiful bloodline. Breathe, Lisa. Indigo Blue Overdrive. Her voice started as a whisper and ended as a shout, her fist swinging forward. Just as I passed her, and empty-handed and without plan, yelled, Hey! Don't ever hit a girl! And put myself between Lisa and that horrible man. My sudden appearance caught Lisa off guard. Our eyes met for a second, but her fist didn't stop. Her lips parted to say something, and her fist hit the floor just as the man with fangs landed and looked at me. A ripple ran across the floor, a circle filled with some complicated pattern. When it hit the sinister young man, it knocked him back, and he instantly crumbled, like sand or ash. Oh! Wow, Lisa, I yelled. You idiot, she shrieked, still surprised. A second later my back hit the floor, and a shock ran from my head down to my toes like I'd just been struck by lightning. I passed out. When I woke up, it was the next morning, and everything was over. Straits was standing by my bed, and explained that the remains of Antonio and Alejandro Torres had been cleaned up, that everyone had spent a terrifying night hiding in their homes while Straits and his friends went around the island killing monsters like Alejandro, and that they were confident the island was safe and La Palma could return to normal as soon as the sun rose. And Lisa? I asked. She was out all night working with us. She's exhausted and fast asleep. Is she mad at me? I messed up again and got in her way. George, the Joestars have never hesitated to put themselves in danger, and you are no different. But you're still very young. Not everything you attempt will succeed. Grow up to be a fine young man, true of heart and strong in spirit. Do I have a power like Lisa's? Do you want it? I shuddered at the very thought. Antonio's father had fangs, and was too young, and he could walk on the ceiling. He said he ate Antonio. Yes. You fight monsters like that, Straits? We do. And we train hard so we can have the power we need to fight them. I'm scared. I never want to see anything like that again. If I ever did, I'm sure I couldn't move a muscle. My legs would freeze and he'd eat me alive. I don't want that. I'm scared of that happening. I don't want to go anywhere near anyone like that again. I don't want power like Lisa's. As I said this, I felt so pathetic I started crying. At the time, the fear had left me, but it all came flooding back. A heavy sort of fear that made it hard to breathe. I was panting through my sobs. I was mad at myself for crying in front of Straits, but at the same time I thought, look how pathetic I am. How can anyone ask me to fight? Lisa's much more brave. Let her handle it. I was awful, and that just made me cry harder. But you did move, didn't you? Straits said, patting me on the back. I didn't say anything. What I'd done was just dumb. I was embarrassed. Straits and company decided to stay in La Palma until it was time to take Lisa with them to Italy. They said they'd started her training in earnest while chasing the monsters. I didn't want to hear about it, so I didn't ask. I couldn't meet Lisa's eye, and she spoke to me less and less, and the mood in the house got so grim I was almost looking forward to her leaving. While I was still at home recuperating, Suku came to visit. When I asked how things were at school, I heard I was hardly the only one absent due to shock. Giulio, on the other hand, had come every day, and had largely taken over Antonio's role. He'd made it sound like he had no plans to continue persecuting me, though. Elizabeth mentioned it in passing, but apparently the Torres family were actually English. I looked into it. Their real name was Hightower. Antonio was born Anthony, and Alejandro was actually Alexander. They simply changed their names to seem more Spanish. They'd been in the railroad business in England, gone bankrupt and rushed up here. And with that history in mind, he may have targeted you. I had no response to that. It was all over. The Torres family had come to the Canary Islands broken and had met their fates. La Palma was a bright, happy place. I still found it hard to believe such darkness had lain hidden in the shadows, or that Alejandro had really walked on the ceiling, Fang's bed. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "Coming to visit." Suku made a face. "Yeah, well, when it all went down, I couldn't do anything." "Ha, so? I don't care about that. I've never really had a friend. Nobody's ever come over to play." "Oh. Sorry. It's not your fault. But truth is, I think I've treated you rather coldly." "You did? I never really noticed. Why? Because I'm English?" I braced myself, expecting to be told he just didn't like me. But what he actually said made no sense. "Because I was a detective." "Was? I don't really get it, but aren't you still?" "Maybe. But I'm no longer sure. And you can't call yourself a detective if you aren't sure." "Huh." "Not a care in the world, have you, Jorge Joestar? But don't think you'll be able to lay back and let things wash over you forever. The time is drawing near. Let us talk about certainty. I call myself a detective, and I perform the role well. I have my failures and make mistakes, but I remain calm. Why? Because I am certain that I am a detective and will solve the case. That is why I never hesitated to call myself a detective. You understand? In my mind, the word detective is an honor, one others use to describe you, not something you ordinarily use to describe yourself. Artists don't normally call themselves masters or geniuses. They don't describe their own work as masterpieces. Describing yourself as a detective is normally just as comical." "I guess, but it didn't strike me as strange when you called yourself a detective." "That's what's weird. Why do we feel like I won't get it totally wrong? You, others, even me. The cases a detective gets mixed up in are always extremely complicated and filled with surprises. The criminals always use elaborate tricks, and there's always at least one last-minute plot twist. It should be completely impossible to reach the truth without any mistakes. Maybe once. But every time? But you said you made mistakes." "Yes, but in the end I always find the truth and solve the case." "Isn't that good? But isn't it also weird?" Are you under a lot of pressure? You mean everyone expects you to succeed and that's getting you down?" "Not once. I've never felt so pressured. I always find the truth." "So what's the problem?" "That's my point. There is no problem. And that's the problem. I'm just an ordinary boy. Guaranteed success should be completely impossible." "So even though you always succeed, you think it's weird that you do?" "Exactly," Suku said, very earnest. "Human beings not generally have such clearly defined roles." So you think you lack modesty?" "No. I think I have no need for modesty. I'm confident that lack of modesty will never be a problem for me." "So everything always goes your way and you know it will?" "Yes, I think we're getting somewhere," Suku said, watching me intently. "My certainty comes from that. I don't believe the world was made for me. I know it was. I'm not talking about the small boost of confidence that comes when things are going well for you. I mean I was chosen by the god of this world. And I know I was. That's why I can call myself a detective without a trace of shame, and have that cause no problems at all." Well, you've been very lucky, but I don't see that this is a bad thing." We're drifting away from the point again. "So let me say this, Jorge Joestar. I've been playing the role of the detective all this time, and I know exactly how it feels. Something like this cannot occur without the arbitrary will of a god. I have something watching over me. Something like a god, yet not God. People do say God's with us. Gods do not care about the individual. They don't play favourites. Even if they do give someone a role to play, they will not manipulate matters to the point of disrupting their natural order. What I have has the power of a god, but one that works only for me. Let me say exactly what I mean. Say that I'm Sherlock Holmes. That I'm certain I have something outside of this world serving as my Arthur Conan Doyle. I am as certain of this as I am certain I am a detective. And I have a name for this thing, guiding me from somewhere not of this world. I call it Beyond. He was delusional, I thought. He was too smart and too successful, and got carried away, or genuinely sick in the head. All his natural modesty had been repressed and twisted until he had to believe in this guardian. Suku wasn't done spouting nonsense. But here I am speaking in the present tense, when really this is all in the past. Like I said at the start, I no longer have the certainty required to call myself a detective. My beyond has abandoned me. I'm still me, but my role in this world is no longer guaranteed by beyond. Beyond has chosen a new protagonist for this world, for this story. You, Jorge Joestar. This is the last thing I'm certain of. Huh? What in the... And the only reason I need to be sure it's you is that I'm jealous of you. I would never have imagined that it could be this terrifying to have the reason for your existence snatched away. I've never had thoughts like these before. It really drives home just how much I took for granted my position and the peace of mind it brought. Sure, I had my rough patches and things happened that were sad or painful, but as long as I fulfilled my role, I was satisfied. And a life filled with satisfaction is something to be grateful for. I know that much. Even at 11. And because I'm 11, I'm a little jealous you've stolen my position. I'm just a kid after all. I was pretty sure I wasn't to blame for whatever he was accusing me of, but beyond that it made no sense. So does this mean I have to become Sherlock Holmes and act like a detective instead of you? I asked. He blinked at me. No, I doubt it. Your story already has monsters and mystic powers in it, so I doubt you'll end up being a detective. I think you'll play the character of Jorge Joestar in a story called Jorge Joestar. A little bit on the nose there, Mr. Author Man. Sure, normal then. I plan on doing that anyway. Suku gave me a very serious look. That'll never happen. With Beyond at your side, your adventure will be without compare. Let me give you one piece of advice. You should believe. Remember that. Believe in Beyond, and you will overcome your fate. He made it sound prophetic, but I couldn't take it seriously. But I did become friends with Suku. Pretty much by the end of that day, we'd become best friends, like I'd always dreamed of having. We talked about everything. My stories were always pathetic, but the tales Suku told of his adventures were highly entertaining. He was Japanese, and his name could be written in kanji. The kanji used were those numbers 9, 10, 9, 10, and 9. Even in Japan, nobody else had a name like that. He'd been born in Fuku Prefecture, in a small town called Nishiakatsuki. When he was 3, his archaeologist father took him to Africa, and when he was 5, he came to the Canary Islands with his mother. When he was 6, he began working as a detective, not just in the Canary Islands, but on the Spanish mainland too. He'd even been called away to Egypt to solve a mystery. The cases he'd solved were as bizarre as he'd promised, and after solving so many incredibly complicated cases, I could see why he'd start to wonder if some kind of god was on his side. I never did go back to school. Instead, I spent all my time playing with Suku. It was almost time for Lisa to leave, but I was so busy enjoying friendship I'd barely spoken to her in weeks. I'd expected to be sad, but it was starting to look like a tearless farewell. Straits and his mysterious companions came over for dinner and ate and drank a lot. Mum cried, and Lisa seemed to be as emotionally uninvested as I was. She just told everyone, "I will follow my destiny." I didn't really try to talk to me at all. I wasn't happy to have to go, but I had a new friend, and Antonio Torres was no longer around to torment me, so I was no longer that worried about the future, and I figured Lisa was glad she didn't have to protect me all the time now. I didn't tell her that, though. What I did say was this. After the big noisy dinner, after the others had taken their drinks to the cigar room or the terrace, I heard a voice call my name, and turned to see Lisa standing there in her green dress. "Hey," I said, and then didn't know what else to say. I knew there was a lot I should say, but none of it seemed right. "Since I was a little girl, I've always wondered why I wasn't a Joestar," Lisa said. "I wished I could have been. Then Mama Erina would be my mum, and you'd be my little brother, and I'd be your big sister." But as I grew older, I started to think maybe it was better this way. "Why? Would I have made things harder for you if you were my sister?" She laughed. I hadn't seen her smile in a long time. "Don't be stupid, George." "No, what do you think, George? Would you want me to be your sister?" I can't even imagine it. I don't know what to think. You'll always be Lisa to me." This was true. The idea has certainly crossed my mind, but I just couldn't imagine a world where she was really related to me. And it had never occurred to me to wonder if it was a good thing that she wasn't. Good, Lisa said, smiling. What? Well, if we were brother and sister, we couldn't get married. Huh? I don't really get love or any of that stuff yet, but I'm glad I could marry you. Married? To Lisa? I can't imagine that, I blurted out. That wasn't something to admit to any girl, least of all Lisa. You're so rude, she said, laughing. I love you, Lisa, I said quickly. I had no idea why I said that. Me too, George. I love you too. What were we talking about? We went to bed, and when we woke up in the morning and went to see her off, she just waved at me, and I can't remember if she said anything else. Mum and I went back to the house alone, and I went out to play with Suku. In the New Year, Suku and I both turned 12. Being with him, we often encountered mysteries, and just in the Canary Islands I got mixed up in no less than 3 serial killer cases. But obviously I can't show you that, otherwise this book would be even longer, and it's already 666 pages, so God fucking forbid we have that shit. What the heck? I can still do this detective thing just fine, Suku said, scratching his head. But he was really, really smart, and I couldn't even manage to be as useful as Watson. When we were 13, we solved 15 locked room mysteries, and when we were 14, we captured 2 serial killers, and when we were 15, we discovered the 15 locked room mysteries from 2 years ago before were actually the work of a single criminal and captured the real killer. By I mean mostly Suku. Again, I couldn't put any of that in because this book is fucking long and it's going to take me forever to read. I thought we would spend high school in the same way, but shortly after capturing the killer behind the 15 locked room mysteries, Suku had to go back to Japan and I cried a lot. I really didn't know how I could go on alone. Ha ha ha, that's where beyond comes in, he said, standing on the docks. I hadn't heard that word in a while. This isn't funny, I said, but I knew he never joked. I'm serious. Do you remember what I said the first time we talked? The thing I told you to remember? Believe in beyond and you will overcome your fate. I did, but I wanted to focus on how unhappy I was to be saying goodbye to my first and only friend. I didn't want to talk about that crap at all. There was no point in talking crap about how I was the protagonist of my own life here. I just really didn't want to say goodbye to this handsome detective who'd solved so many mysteries with me at his side. I'll come to Japan someday. I'll come find you, even on the other side of the world, and we'll solve more cases together. Or he'd solve them, at any rate. I kind of get the feeling that won't happen, Suku said, laughing. I couldn't believe it. He had no tact at all. No, I'm coming, I insisted. If beyond wills it, he said, gave me a Japanese dictionary, got on a ship, and sailed away. 3 days later, the boat carrying Suku Majuku vanished off the coast of Florida. 5 days later, news of this reached the Canary Islands. I prayed every night for 2 months, but when the army found the boat at the bottom of the sea, I had to settle for feeling deeply betrayed. I cursed God and cried. I don't know what plan you had, but the price for stealing my friend was very, very high. He was my first and only friend. He was amazing. He should have been the main character. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Nishi Akatsuki. My name is Jorge Joestar. I'm 15 years old and live in Fuku Prefecture, Japan. I'm English, but I look and probably am Japanese. For reasons I've never known, my Japanese birth parents were unable to look after me, or even intended to do so. Without even giving me a name, I was handed over to the authorities and adopted by the Joestar family. So I was given a name that could be either English or Japanese. According to Japanese law, when I turn 18, I'll have to pick either Japanese citizenship or English. At the same time, I have to select a formal name. Currently my official name is spelled out in katakana, with no kanji or Roman letter spelling set. The Roman letters in my passport read Joji Joestar, which is super lame. If I go with Japanese citizenship, on my 18th birthday I'll have to pick kanji for the name, and currently I'm leaning towards the kanji for transferred and child, in keeping with the Japanese idea that one's name should describe you. Since I was raised English, trying to act like I'm Japanese now feels like I'm pretending. I'm used to the katakana, and don't really care what my Japanese name is. As far as the English name, despite the strong objections of my family, I'm dead set on George, so I write it like that any time I get the chance. I'm not the least bit Latin, but my friends all call me Jojo, and I get called Detective Jojo a lot. But if I went with George with a G, the name Jojo would be impossible. If nothing else, Joji wouldn't cause any problems with the nickname, but if I let any native English speakers read it, they'd never pronounce it right. Joji's the reading by and for Japanese speakers. If details don't add up right, I get agitated and start searching for a better way. This trait has led to my room being very clean and made me a great detective. And that very trait is getting up my nose right now. Something had been bothering me for a while and was coming to a head. This particular itch had been nagging me for the last couple of years, ever since I solved 15 locked room mysteries in a row, but 2 serial killer investigations had distracted me for basically this entire year. But now that I successfully caught the triplet dismemberment psycho, Guru Maijin, and had received word that they'd finally tracked down the serial torturer nail peeler after his daring escape 6 months back, I was finally able to relax. I made a full report of my escapades to my father, who, a victim of a particularly misguided attempt at selecting a Japanese-sounding name, was named Jorge Joestar. Then I went to bed, and finally remembered the source of my discontent. Specifically, a newspaper article that laid out the locations of the 15 locked room mysteries on a map of Fuku Prefecture. All the cases had happened in the northern half of Fuku, in the area called Weihoku. The newspaper article numbered them in the order they'd been committed. In other words, the order the victims died. This made sense from a news perspective, but my immediate thought was that it was totally the wrong approach to these particular cases. The trick to locked room mysteries lies in their discovery. The realisation that the room has been locked from the inside is what defines them. The killer's job ends with the discovery. I made a mental map of them numbered in order of discovery, and then it shows the map, but I don't care enough to show you it, but it's like a map, and it's got a bunch of numbers on it, or whatever. Something about this map had been tickling the corner of my mind for a while now. My instincts told me this order had meaning. My first thought was that the locations were drifting slowly south. Each of the 15 cases had a killer, and we'd found no links between the killers, the victims, or any other aspects of the cases. But the cases did occur more or less from north to south, moving like a cold front across the map. Fuku's Reihoku area wasn't terribly large. 15 locked room mysteries happening in rapid succession was enough to make you wonder if the urge to commit a locked room murder was somehow communicable. An outbreak of the locked room murder syndrome. I had a vague memory of some experts suggesting as much on the news. Maybe it worked like dismemberment. It was a known fact that once the idea entered the public consciousness that cutting up your victim made it easier to carry, to hide the body, and to throw investigators off the track, we saw a sharp rise in the number of mutilated corpses. But if that was the case, the influence would have spread to the whole country, and the trend wouldn't have died out after only 15 cases. But it had. As far as I knew, in the year since the 15 cases, there had been no locked room mysteries at all. These 15 were an isolated group. They looked like they had no connections, or someone was making them look that way. I opened the mental map again and stared at it. Was there a pattern that lay beneath the seemingly random spread? Some principle at work? Something beyond the general spread to the south? A boundary or border? These were locked room murders. They took place in enclosed areas. If there was some sort of border around each of them, why had the word border caught my attention? Maps have an outline around them, marking the borders of the location or place depicted. I felt sure the scenes of each crime weren't scattered at random, but carefully placed at appropriate distances, placed as far away from each other as the border allowed. But I couldn't quite see where the boundaries were. Why not? There'd be no cases discovered in the city of Takefu, leaving a big white square, and that felt like it was getting in the way of me seeing the pattern. If a 16th case had happened there, then the map would have made a lot more sense. I thought, and suddenly I saw it. That gap had its own borders, dividing up the map neatly. A large 4x4 grid laid over the map. It had been right under my nose all along, but the blank space had blinded me to it. Looked at this way, I instantly knew that blank space, the empty square, was the key to everything. This was a giant 15-piece puzzle. I solved the puzzle an instant later. It was easy. I only had to move each piece a single square. Each number was only one square away from sequential order. Since they moved in different directions, it appeared at random, but order lurked next door. There's a bunch of illustrations here of, like, puzzles and shit, but I can't, I don't know how to get them up. Also, I'm too lazy. Fuck off. Having solved this 2-year-old puzzle, I wondered what it meant. A 15 puzzle. If there was a puzzle, then someone must have designed it, and if it was hidden, that meant it was a message to whoever discovered it. Was someone trying to tell me something? When this flood of locked room murders had happened 2 years ago, the police and I had, of course, searched thoroughly for any connection between them, and verified countless times that there was no such thing. Was there really someone directing all the individual killers? The trick they'd used were all different. No connections, no pattern. We'd been unable to figure out exactly where the killers all got the idea to use a locked room trick. They all insisted it just seemed like a good idea, and we had no choice but to take them at their word. I knew perfectly well that human imagination did not always have a clear foundation, and certain criminal actions could trend without any contact between perpetrators. But the police and I didn't take the killers at their word, and had searched high and low for any indication someone had helped them. How had we missed it? Had there really been someone who tracked down would-be murderers and supplied them with plans for a locked room trick? There was. There had to be. The puzzle proved it. But we'd caught all the killers. I'd explained the case and they'd confessed, explaining their motives and essentially turning themselves in. They'd been very cooperative with the police and prosecutors afterwards. Was this all a performance to protect the designer? What kind of person could inspire such loyalty in all 15 killers? This was no good. I couldn't start doubting the designer's existence now. Throughout the case we'd been constantly of the opinion that there should be one, but the evidence said otherwise. That made it hard to believe, but now I knew the truth. I had to stop. If this puzzle existed, then someone had to have made it. I had to focus on deciphering the message contained within the puzzle. I looked over my mental map of the puzzle again. A simple 15 puzzle. Each number moved a single square away from the starting position. Starting from the blank space, all you had to do was move the number that belonged there into the gap and the puzzle solved itself. I checked the order of moves again. Blank 10, 14, 13, 9, 5, 1, 2, 6, 7, 3, 4, 8, 12, 11, 15. Was this supposed to indicate a domino murder exchange sequence? If the victim from the 10th case was killed by the killer of the 14th case, and the victim in 14 was killed by the 13 killer, if the killers had traded places, allowing those with actual motives for the killing to establish alibis at the time of death and evade suspicion, would that make sense? But in that case, there was no indication who could have killed the victim in the 15th case. If the domino murder exchange were to complete, the murdered in case 10 would have to kill the victim in case 15, but that wasn't shown anywhere in the puzzle. If I was to correctly read the implications of this puzzle in terms of a domino murder exchange, the 10th case's killer would have killed the victim in the blank space, and as yet undiscovered 16th locked room, and the killer in the 15th case would have committed the murders in both the 11th and the 15th cases. The true killer in the 16th case would have kept his hands clean. So did that mean he was the one behind the whole shebang? No. I was trying too hard to find answers in this puzzle. The whole point of exchanging murders was to get yourself a cast iron alibi and keep yourself off the list of suspects. But in all 15 cases, the killers had been arrested, confessed, sent to the courts and were starting to stand trial, with the possible exception of the killer in some hypothetical extra case that might occupy the blank spot. Nobody got away with anything. If they'd been so desperate to avoid suspicion that they'd do something as risky as trade murders, hadn't they been caught a little too easily? No. These 15 murders may have taken place in a relatively short time period of a year, but it wasn't like they happened all the same time. They were spread evenly out across the full 12 months. So the first locked room mystery had already been solved by the time the third was discovered, the killer identified. The cases were being steadily solved as the new locked rooms were found. It was absolutely impossible for the ninth killer to have actually committed the 13th murder as the puzzle implied. By the time that case happened, I'd already identified the killer in the ninth case. The police had taken him into custody and he was behind bars. For the same reasons, the killer from the 5th case could never have murdered the 9th victim, and the killer in the 1st case could never have committed the 5th crime. This could only fit the model of a domino murder exchange if I had been wrong about all the killers I've caught, if all those on trial were taking the fall for the real culprit. But that was impossible. Why? Because I was a detective, and if I felt I was right about something, I was never wrong. These killers were the killers. The domino murder exchange theory itself was wrong. If I had the right killers, those cases were closed. Solved. Then if I focused less on the numbers themselves and more on the nature of the 15 puzzle, was the intent to suggest that the locked room murders had each occurred somewhere other than they would normally have happened? The 10th case would have happened in the blank space, the 14 would have happened where the 10th was discovered, with each successive murder committed in the wrong location? Did that work? Not in the least, I decided quickly. There was nothing unnatural about the locations of the murders. Of the 15 cases, 2 had occurred in tourist attractions, but the others had all occurred in homes belonging to the killers, victims, or friends. Each trick had been tied specifically to the layout of the room, and no particular contortions had been required to make them work. The trick used to lock the room in case 14 would never have worked to the location used in case 10. It was impossible to divorce the tricks from the rooms they locked. A locked room trick can only be manufactured from the geography of the room, the placement of furniture, accents, of cracked string or wire that could be run through, of hiding places. These specifics were different at each location. What the killer could physically do was different in each case, as different as the people involved. It went without saying, finding tricks that could be used at 15 locations was highly improbable. No, it was impossible. 4 of the 15 cases had taken place in 4 of the strangest buildings in Fuku, and used the bizarre nature of those buildings as an essential component of the trick. No trick that involved moving walls and floors, or ceilings that turned upside down could possibly be used anywhere else. The locked room murders had been used in the right place by the right people. I'd solved each of them correctly. Those cases were over. So what was this puzzle? If I assumed that I had solved everything correctly, the meaning of this could not be that the real solution would only be seen if I shifted everything. There must be something else. Something new. The 15 locked room mysteries were of no importance, and I had to examine the meaning of this puzzle from the surface. The simplest reading was the correct one. Namely, that because each number had been shifted, a new extra space had been left behind. The man behind the 15 locked rooms had created a new mystery, one that had only just begun. Then what I had to do was try to find this new extra space. I got out of bed, dressed, got on my bike and rode north toward Takefu. What was I looking for? Some sort of locked room, I supposed, but the borders I'd found each covered an area 10 kilometres square. Trying to find something locked room-esque by aimlessly pedalling around country roads in the middle of the night seemed hardly productive. But as I came down Route 365, entering the outskirts of Takefu, I found a house on fire. It was so sudden I almost didn't recognise it as a fire. But I took a bizarre comfort in the knowledge that this was what I was supposed to find, that it had been prepared for me. I barely even had to look. The farmhouse on fire belonged to the Kato family of Nishi Akatsuki. Kato Serika's parents had died recently, and she'd been into town to deal with their empty house. As I furiously pedalled closer, I found her standing outside with her husband Satoshi and their 4-year-old son Seshiru, staring blankly at the fire. "Are you hurt?" I asked. When Serika and Satoshi failed to respond, Seshiru piped up, "There's a pool in the house and the stranger's swimming in it." What the heck did that mean? I looked in the window of the burning house, and Seshiru was right. The house was filled with water, and there was jets of it spitting out of every crack. The water was moving through the house at whirlpool speeds, and the front door seemed to have been shut by Satoshi to protect his family from the current, and the furniture hurtling along in it. As I gasped, I caught a glimpse of a human figure rocketing past the second-story window, but it didn't look like he was swimming to me. Was he dead? Was this another locked room mystery? I tried asking the Katos again. "How did this happen?" "I don't know," Serika said. "We were eating dinner when suddenly water started pouring down the stairs. We rushed to the house and just started burning. It came from upstairs. Water? Did you have a tank up there?" I looked up at the house, but it was a normal-looking building, no sign of any water tower. No, Satoshi said. "That's no ordinary water, neither. That's seawater." "Seawater?" "It was salty, like." "Yeah, that's salt water, all right. It reeked of it," Serika said. Seshiru laughed and nodded. "That's seawater, yeah. It certainly did smell like the sea. It's 'cause it's seawater. But we were a good 40 kilometres from the ocean, and there were several mountain ranges in the way. How in the hell had so much salt water suddenly appeared on the second floor? At any rate, there was definitely somebody inside, so this would soon be a crime scene. I like to preserve it as much as possible, but that was hard to do with it being on fire and all. I looked up at the second-story window again, and saw a young man clinging to it, looking down at us. His hair was in his eyes, thrashing in the current, but for a moment our eyes met. I just assumed he was already dead. Guess not. Alright, you guys better move back, I shouted, and ran to the nearest window. Between the weight of the water and the fire, the walls were ready to burst. The indoor pool was no long for this. Well, so fucking grammar mistake there. Did I have time? I broke the glass on the nearest ground floor window. There was a crack, and water burst out, sending shards of glass and bits of broken window frame rocketing past me. Shah! I barely dodged out of the way in time, and quickly broke another window. The spray on my face confirmed that the house was filled with salt water. But this wasn't the time to ponder that mystery. I reached the front door, put my hand on the knob, but before I could open it, the hinges gave up, and a wave of water burst out, sweeping me and the door away. There was a roar as the water filled the front lawn, and when it subsided, I found the second-story man lying on the ground in front of me, coughing up water. "Pardon," he said. "¿Qué pasó? ¿Dónde estoy?" Spanish. He might be wet, but this guy looked Japanese. He was very handsome, but looked about the same age as me. "This is Japan? I have no idea what's going on, though," I said. "Oh, Japanese," he said, in Japanese. Behind him, there was a deafening rumble, and the Kato residence collapsed into a pile of wet bricks. At least the fire was out. There was another rumble. Thunder. I looked up, and the clouds covering the sky were swirling. I saw something shaped like a funnel retreating back into the sky. It was dark and hard to make out, but had that been a tornado? But tornadoes generally drag things off the ground, not drop them off. And for it to do it on a pinpoint touchdown on the Kato residence, on tonight of all nights, at this exact time, with no other damage, I had no choice but to accept it. That tornado had brought this boy here, from somewhere that spoke Spanish. "You okay?" I asked. He brushed his wet hair out of his eyes with both hands, and blinked up at me. "That's a tough question. I'm not injured at any rate. What day is it?" "July 23rd. Okay, same day. But I was on a boat, and we just sighted the coast of Florida." "Florida? Between the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico?" "What's the Atlantic? Never heard of this gulf either." "Huh? The Atlantic? It's an ocean." "Sorry, but there's no such thing." "What do you mean?" "There's only one ocean. The ocean." "No, this is where in Japan?" "Fuku Prefecture. Nishiakatsuki." "Huh? Then I'm home." "How? What, you're from Nishiakatsuki? So am I. How old are you?" "I'm 15. 16 this year." "Same age. My name is Kaito Tsukumojuku. My address here is Nishiakatsuki Cho Nishiakatsuki 321. Weird name, but I gulped for a totally different reason. I turned to the Kato family by the gate. "He's related to you." The address he'd just given was the empty house where Serika's parents had lived, but the Katos didn't answer. They just stared in horror at the remains of the house they'd just built a few years earlier. I looked back at Tsukumojuku. "Your name written 910 910 9den? "Ah, Fuku dialect." "Yes, it is. So you made quite the bizarre entrance. What do you remember?" "Well, I was on a boat, crossing the Atlantic from the Canary Islands to the America." "The Canary Islands? Never heard of them?" "Small island owned by Spain off the west coast of Africa." "Okay. And the Atlantic?" "The Atlantic Ocean lies between the North and South American continent on the one side, and the Europe and African continents on the other, doesn't it?" "No. Also, what are you talking about, American and African continents?" "What continents do you have?" "Panlandia." "This doesn't sound like an issue of education," he said. I nodded. "I'm very well educated," I said. He gave me a dubious look, so I added, "I'm a detective, after all." His eyes opened wide, then he grinned. "Oh, so am I." "Oh yeah? You're shitting me. The great detective Kaito Tsukumojuku? Never heard of you, and it sounds like that ain't 'cause you operated abroad. Right. Better introduce myself then. My name's Jorge Joestar. Everyone calls me Jojo. Detective Jojo. Welcome to the New World, where the Atlantic and the Canary Islands don't exist. Sukumajuko just gaped at me for a while. What is beyond playing at? He asked at last. What role does it have in mind for me? This made no sense, but it seemed like he was talking to himself, so I let it pass. No idea where he came from, but it was a place with weird-ass tornadoes. Didn't seem like somewhere you could just up and go as you pleased. What he just said was probably some sort of religious grumbling. Nothing I could do about it. The way he'd appeared was so bizarre I wasn't really all that surprised by anything anymore, but by the time he was through getting checked out at the hospital, Sukumajuku had gone straight through surprise to clutching his head. Firstly, while it was indeed July 23rd, it was 2012, not 1904. He travelled forwards in time over 100 years. We quickly proceeded to comparing world maps. Of course, there were no world maps that looked the way Sukumajuku described his world, so he had to draw his freehand. He produced a very detailed sketch of a very strange world. His world looked broken. I showed him ours, and he said, "This is impossible." My sentiments exactly. When Sukumajuku said nothing more, I said, "There's no way the land shifted this much in 100 years. Continental drift was a matter of a few millimeters a year, and that was on the active side. It would take hundreds of millions of years for Sukumajuku's world to become mine. The continents moved on the plates, forming a giant continent, breaking up and moving together again. Plate tectonics showed this had happened and would happen again. Even if his continents had just merged together once to form my world, this would have taken forever. But I didn't see this change happening so easily. The pieces were all mixed up. To get this far, they'd have to trial and error it for billions of years, longer than the life of the Earth. It had been roughly 100 million years since the first humans showed up, so if Sukumajuku came from the same planet as me, he would have had to have been through several continental divides. But if he came from a billion years ago, his clothes, manners and Japanese were much too similar to ours. I couldn't see much more than 100 years difference between us. I was pretty sure the only possible explanation would involve parallel world theory. That sounded fun. This proved parallel worlds not only existed, but that it was possible to travel between them. Ha ha! While I worked myself into a tizzy, Sukumajuku sat on the hospital bed, comparing the two maps closely, muttering surprise at the location of one place or another, confused about the location of others. "I say," he said at last, "I don't see England anywhere." "English is a phantom country, not on any map," I said, the stock self-deprecating description all English citizens used. A group of Anglo-Saxons living in Maine in the 19th century had declared independence, calling themselves the Kingdom of England. They even fought a war. The American government never officially recognised them, but several other countries did, only for them to collapse from within and be swiftly swallowed back up into the United States. Having lost their country, the English scattered across the world. There are many families like the Joestars that would have died out if they hadn't adopted. "Oh," Sukumajuku said gravely. "Well, at any rate, I have a theory as to how I came to this world." "You're some detective," I said. I was used to hearing this, but I'd never said it myself before. I was a little miffed, honestly, but I didn't have enough data to form a theory of my own yet. "It's just a theory. I've no proof of any kind," he said, and pointed down at the map he'd drawn. "I was headed here, towards the southern tip of Florida. If you connect Florida, this island, Puerto Rico, and then this island, the Bermudas, you get a triangle-shaped area of ocean. Legend has it that many ships vanish entirely as they pass through this area. Sometimes just the passengers vanish, and the ships around found empty. We call it the Bermuda Triangle. Like I said, just before I passed out, I was gazing at the coast of Florida on deck, then went down to my cabin to stow my luggage. The boat was headed due north, right through this point on the triangle. Now, this area of Florida is located at 25 degrees north, 81 degrees west, which is exactly where Japan is in this world." "Ooh," I thought, and took a closer look at the maps myself. Even on the hand-drawn map, it was clear the 2 points overlapped. Then I noticed something, and said excitedly, "And if that theory is true, then we've basically figured out how to get you back." Since Sukumajuku still didn't quite know his way around the world, I pointed. So there's a big gulf in the centre of Panlandia, with a peninsula and a bunch of islands. That's Florida, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda all right on top of each other, right? The Bermuda Triangle is basically the Bermuda Dot. And according to your map, this is right on top of your world's Nishiakatsuki. Really? Ha! This is straight up telling you where to go to get back home, isn't it? Yeah, but it's kind of scary, isn't it? Like someone made this happen. Like they summoned me. I agreed. Like nothing, someone clearly did. Sure, that's scary, but I got your back on this. I'm hella interested in what's happening to you. Fucking use hella. But I'm not the target here, Sukumajuku said pointedly. You are. Eh? What? I'm more like an innocent bystander who just got mixed up in this mess. But you aren't. Why were you there tonight? How did you find me? Good point. I explained how I'd solved 15 locked room murders 2 years ago, had found the 15 puzzle that had eluded me at the time, solved it, then took off down Route 365 to verify the answer. I had to admit, he might be right. I was led right to him. Guess neither of us were there, coincidentally. Not only that, you said you solved 15 locked room murders 2 years ago. In my world, I did exactly the same thing. Huh? Did how? In the Canary Islands, on the island of La Palma. I'm sure the details of the cases are different, but the two of us compared notes on the points of each set of 15. They were completely different, of course. The same tricks could not be used in a different country and time, but the order of discovery in Sukumajuku's cases was identical, and the 15 puzzle they formed matched as well. I never noticed, Sukumajuku said gloomily. I just noticed myself like an hour ago. Bet you would have figured her out soon enough. He looked up at me. You ever worked a case with another detective? Nope. Only like 800,000 people even live in Fuku. Lot of cases for the country and I ain't the only detective around, but I never bumped into any of the others on a case. If we hear someone else is on the job, the others all stay away, I suppose. I have heard it happens to Tokyo or Osaka detectives all the time though. I've never even met another detective. The Canary Islands were not much more populated. So let me ask you this. If several detectives are on the case, and one solves the case before the other does, is the slower one still a detective? Ugh, who gave a crap? Just because I solved the 15 puzzle first didn't mean he had to sulk about it. His case was 100 years ago, maybe, so he weren't exactly racing here. Depends on the next case, I said at last. If the slower detective gets there first the first time they team up, they're even. Honestly, I was just trying to make him feel better. He wasn't buying it at all. Detective isn't a title earned over a lifetime. You don't look back over your deeds and realise you're a detective. You know you are, and introduce yourself as such. True enough, if you can't solve a case, you aren't a detective. Certainly, in that moment, other people might say you weren't qualified. Detective, in the sense we use it, is an honorary term. The moment people deny it, you lose the right to it. And you can get it back on the next case. You're thinking in lifetime terms again. You can't be a detective your whole life. You're one on each individual case. Fuck this. Okay, so you feel like you aren't a detective anymore? Do better next time. I haven't believed I was a detective for some time. Even on the Canary Islands, I wasn't sure why I could continue to act like a detective in spite of it. It never felt real. I don't know what you're driving at, but if you solved cases, you're a detective. I might have got to the 15 puzzle before you, but you solved all 15 cases, right? You did your job. If someone got to the truth before you, would you still call yourself a detective? I might keep a lid on it till the next time, yeah. There will be no next time, Sukumajuku said. I'll never call myself a detective again. Not now I've met you. You are the Jorge Joestar who will steal my title. What the fuck are you talking about? I finally slipped and swore in front of him, but he didn't seem to mind. He even laughed. Been a long time since a Jorge Joestar spoke like that to me. What? Are your memories getting confused, or... My memories and mind are clear, Jorge Joestar. I can safely say my mind and headspace had never been so free of clutter. My role as detective may have ended, but I believe I've been given a new one. I'm here to explain beyond to you. I instantly knew I didn't want to hear any of this, but that I needed to hear it all the same. In my world, Sukumajuku said, there is another Jorge Joestar. What? Really? This was getting fun. He told me about this other Jorge Joestar, the story of a bullied kid who'd made friends with a detective and had adventures on a South Seas island that didn't exist in our world. The 15 locked room murders weren't the only similar cases. The 3 serial killer cases I closed the year before that had also been solved 3 years ago by Sukumajuku and his partner, Jorge Joestar. Likely they'd caught psychos remarkably similar to the Guru Maijin and the nail peeler last year. Was this synchronicity, or was history repeating itself? Before I could think further, Sukumajuku said, and this year, George and I captured the true mastermind behind the 15 locked room murders. The man who invented all the locked room tricks and controlled the killers from the shadows. Wait, stop, I yelled. I haven't done that bit yet. Let me think. Sukumajuku recalled from my sudden ferocity. It's not that complicated, he said. You want to steal the detective role back from me? I don't mean to do that, and I doubt that would happen. I ignored him and began thinking furiously. So there was a mastermind. Obviously that made sense, of course there was. 15 locked room murders had happened all in a row, all in Fuku, all in Reihoku. But like I said before, the police and I had suspected there was a mastermind / controller in the shadows, and left no stone unturned in our search for one. Had we missed something? I didn't think so. I was sure we'd been thorough, and correct. There were no connections of any kind between anyone related to any of the 15 cases. The police and forensics people had been over every detail. We'd even tried hypnosis and every occult technique we could think of to no avail. We even tried voodoo dolls. I had not been wrong. Those 15 locked room murders had ended with the summoning of this other detective from a bizarre alternate universe. I'd been so sure the 15 cases had each been independent, even though they'd led me, coincidentally or otherwise, to what seemed awfully like a magical phenomenon. But perhaps that notion was my mistake. I definitely hadn't overlooked everything. I checked every detail. Even now I felt comfortable removing that option from the table. So if I hadn't overlooked anything, logically, there must be something I hadn't looked at yet. The man who invented all the locked room tricks and controlled the killers from the shadows. If someone like this was behind the cases in my world too, this shadow controller's shadow must have touched each of the 15 killers. But that was impossible. One of the cases had happened inside a prison, and the killer was serving a life sentence with limited visitation rights. And we checked every visitor thoroughly. Another locked room case involved a shut-in son who killed his father. The son hadn't spoken to anyone outside his family, and we'd found no records of any suspicious contact online either. This shadow controller could not physically exist. In other words, he had to exist in some non-physical form. This wasn't that surprising an idea. We'd already entertained a number of occult theories and tested them thoroughly. We'd done occult, so what else was there? Where did they meet? Where could they meet without meeting? Dreams, I said. Or daydreams. I wasn't talking to Sukumajuku. I was just thinking out loud. I kept going. Not daydreams. That's just thinking. No way for someone else to control you. Unless you had a delusion you were being controlled. But that would still mean they created the locked room trick themselves. So it must be dreams. Were dreams 100% produced by your own mind? At this point I noticed Sukumajuku watching me. Half surprised, half impressed. From this I knew I must be right. But really? Dreams? It was my idea though. Dreams then. Could this shadow controller have manipulated the killers in their dreams? The killers in my world all met a clown in their dreams called the Locked Room Maestro, Sukumajuku said. He forced the plans for the murders on them. Since everyone forgets their dreams, they all thought they came up with the tricks themselves. Had he watched Inception or something? But that was sci-fi and a movie, and you couldn't actually jump into someone else's dream. I must have looked sceptical, but Sukumajuku carried on expositing. This so-called Locked Room Maestro wore clown clothes and makeup, and appeared in the dreams of the killers, working his way into their hearts, and drawing forth the darkest emotions within. That part wasn't so hard. All he had to do was find someone they hated, or had trouble getting along with, or just had trouble communicating with, even just simple disgruntlement. Once he found those emotions, the locked room maestro would appear in their dreams and blame all those problems on this one person. Nobody can escape their nightmares. The locked room maestro would twist their fear, making it seem like their eventual victim was the source of it all. No matter how forced the reason, logic and sequential progression have no place in dreams. Only the emotional response matters. Once the seed was sown, the killer's fixations would give them even worse dreams. The maestro would keep a firm grip on the reins, whispering that it was all their victim's fault, and his targets had no choice but to believe him. This vicious cycle continued until they were entirely under his control. The maestro persisted, driving them deeper, even torturing them if he had to. The killers would find themselves murdered in their dreams, but their eventual victims, or by the maestro himself. These dreams were so terrifying they'd awaken in a nerve and frenzy, and this persisted until the real world felt like a dream to them. Physically, there's nothing wrong with them, but that just makes it worse. They're spending all their time in a state of panic, and don't remember the dreams that caused it, so the frustration is building up inside them with no way to escape, and no clear cause. Eventually, someone they would never have dreamed of killing begins to seem like someone they would murder, and they act. But the locked room maestro never once met them in person. He kept his distance, remained hidden in their dreams. The only reason we ever found the evil clown is because the girl he tried targeting next had a pathological fear of clowns. The maestro's guise was so terrifying she remembered the dream clearly, spoke to those around her about the horrible clown that kept coming into her dreams, and whispering around locked room murders, and this in turn attracted our attention. Nobody she'd spoken to believed the words she'd said, but we did. We spoke with the 15 killers and they all began to remember him. From what they remembered, we were able to piece together his identity. Aside from the red nose and poofy wig, he was just wearing makeup. From their descriptions, we were able to put together a composite sketch. He'd also talked about himself quite a bit in their dreams. He was so sure they wouldn't remember anything. He let slip a number of details that helped us identify him. I suppose after 15 successful remote control murders, all the confidence is unsurprising. He was young too, still in high school, wanted to be a mystery novelist when he grew up. But he had the power to slip into other people's dreams. When we burst into his house, police in tow, we found the clown outfit and makeup. We assume he purchased them to make that part feel real. We found notebooks filled with locked room tricks, but no novels. It seems he didn't have what it took to be a writer. "Hell, you can catch the guy, but you can't try him," I said. "No way you can prove the ability to enter dreams, and even if he demonstrates it, nobody would remember." There was no trial. The Spanish police on the Palma beat him to death with their nightsticks and sank his body into the sea at night. George and I were powerless to stop them, and his mother didn't even try. If word got around that her son was a witch, and the church got involved, her whole family would be persecuted. Yikes! Country life 100 years ago sounded harsh. "If you don't mind me veering off subject," Sukumajuku started. I stopped him. "Hang on, sorry, let me check up on this, see if there are any connections between the dreams of my side's killers." I pulled out my phone, asked Shirai Masami at the Fuku PD, and asked him to interrogate the killers about the dreams, using hypnosis if necessary. "Dreams! There you go again with the weird ideas, George," he said, but I knew he'd get it done. I hung up. "That's a modern phone?" Sukumajuku said. "It's so small, and there's no lines, and there are little pictures moving behind that glass panel." Surprising, certainly, but everything he was experiencing was. We had no time to stop and discuss the culture clash. "Look, if we start down that road, it'll never end. America's about to put a man on Mars. I wonder what they'll find on Mars. I wonder what they'll find on Mars. Yeah, leave it for another day," Sukumajuku said. "Back to the point. Or rather, the tangent. I wasn't sure what the main point was anymore, but I let him run with it. Truth is, I don't think Javier Cortez, the true killer, was born with the power to enter dreams. The cause of his problems lay with his mother, Leonora Cortez. Just before the cops made him disappear, Javier confessed everything to George. He asked George, Do you know why I always did locked rooms? George shook his head. Because all deaths take place in locked rooms. I've slipped through the dreams of any number of people and convinced them to kill someone in a locked room. But the one I really wanted to die, the one I really wanted to kill, was myself. When I slept, I was trapped in a locked room with my mother. When George repeated those words to me, I finally started asking the question I should have been asking, now that I had the answer. In other words, why was it Javier spent so much time dreaming? It takes a lot of time to drive someone so far into a corner they'll commit a locked room murder. Javier wasn't working on the 15 killers one at a time. I don't think he did them all at once, but he was always working on several simultaneously. And those are just the people he succeeded with. There must have been other targets that proved less susceptible. He travelled through all their dreams, even showing up in their daytime naps if they got too scared to sleep at night. Which means Javier was sleeping all day too. That's an unhealthy amount of sleep. Why did Javier spend so much time sleeping? Locked in a room with Leonora, he slept, escaping into other people's dreams, hoping to find someone who would kill him. What caused such anger and self-loathing? Why would being locked in a room with his mother make him sleep, and make his hatred erupt across the dreams of strangers? What was his mother doing in that room that would lead to such hatred? These weren't questions. I knew the answer. There was no need to speak it. I assumed some sort of abuse was involved, Tsukumajuku said. The desire to kill himself is the desire to make his flesh disappear. Sleeping and escaping into dreams were ways of escaping his flesh while he was in that locked room with her. Whatever was happening to his flesh was so horrific he had to escape it, which implies the abuse was likely sexual. But we'll never know the truth. Xavier was killed, and Leonora killed herself before her husband, Jean Rivera, returned home. With his family gone, he spoke briefly to George. Whatever happened may have been going on for more than 10 years. Juan was absent for home for long periods of time, and quite the philanderer. When Xavier was young, Juan often made Leonora cry, but at some point the tears stopped. "I've got Xavier," she said. He'd seen the boy comfort her when she cried, so Juan assumed she'd gotten over it, and thought no more about it. He certainly noticed she doted on the boy, but since that meant less strife for him, he was pleased. In that sense, the cause of the cause lay with Juan Rivera Cortez. One person hurt another, that person hurt someone else in turn, and that person developed a strange power that let them harm a number of strangers, and those strangers created locked rooms and murdered people in them. The core pattern behind so many of the world's problems. Reality is what it is, and webs of misery are all around us. But my point is that Javier Cortez's ability to enter strangers' dreams was a power born of the suffering his mother inflicted. It's nothing but a hypothesis, but I've begun to believe that continual, repetitive suffering can lead to the development of unusual powers that help the sufferer escape. That's quite a thought. Here Tsukumajuku explained a case that led to him forming a friendship with the other Jorge Joestar. It was another case of child abuse by an insane mother. Poor Antonio Torres, who had his skin peeled off by his mother every year since he was a baby, and when he turned 10 developed the ability to shed his entire skin intact once a year. Ugh, that's gross. But the cases are remarkably similar, aren't they? Repeated suffering, supernatural abilities. No normal person can shed their skin. Point taken, but can I ask a question? Sure. It might be a little rude. I promise not to mind. Maybe the world you come from's kind of fucked up. Maybe stuff like that just happens there. I don't have any grounds to deny the possibility at the moment. I mean, I've never heard of anything like this. I'd never heard of anything like that before I met Jorge Joestar, and I only have the 2 instances of this phenomenon to draw upon. See? Sorry, but I just think it's your world that's weird. Everything's normal here. I think there are many things about your world that are strange, but perhaps the laws it operates on are simply different from my own. This tangent's getting scary. Some of these mental images I really don't need. Come to think of it, I had Antonio Torres, 1900, his skin, in my luggage. Did it arrive here with me? I was gathering my belongings right before I passed out. I'm certain I had the tube. It was slung over my shoulder. Jesus! I really don't want to see that. But I guess we could ask the Catos? That house is done for, but maybe they found something in the rubble. Yeah, but it's not that important. If they find it, I'd like it back, of course. Xavier Cortez's clown nose and wig were in a different trunk. Holy crap. At any rate, that's enough of that tangent. There's another point I really should make. Something you need to hear. About this other Jorge Joestar? No. About you. Yeah? Me? What was he on about? What could he know about me? You call yourself a detective, so this shouldn't take long for you to grasp. Have you never wondered why it is you're able to solve difficult cases and problems nobody else can? Have you ever found it strange that you always get to the truth in the end? When you find a clue in a book you just happen to be reading, or have an idea triggered by a conversation you happen to have with a complete stranger, or when a criminal close to getting away with it suddenly makes a boneheaded mistake. Have you ever wondered if it was one too many coincidences in your favour? Have you ever felt like the world revolved around you? Like God himself was looking after you? Huh? I mean, I get your drift, but isn't that what a detective is? Luck is part of skill. But humans are prone to failure, Jorge Joestar. Everyone makes mistakes. Normally. I make mistakes all the time. But in the end, you're right. Yeah, but I work my ass off. Hard work doesn't always lead to results, normally. Normally, schmormally. Someone's doing alright, you don't stand there hoping they fuck up. What's your point? That I should be less sure I'm a detective? No, quite the opposite. There's never been any reason to doubt yourself, or that you're a detective. But you should be aware that you're receiving preferential treatment at the hand of an arbitrary god. Why? Should I give thanks to it or something? No. I call this god Beyond, and I'm certain that this god has lined you and the other Jorge Joestar up for a reason, for some greater purpose. It must have been Beyond's power that sent me here. And not because I solved the 15 puzzle? You did. But think of it this way. Beyond set you on that path and summoned me here. See? What most people imagine when they hear the word God is something all-powerful that never explains itself to humans, that acts in a seemingly arbitrary fashion, irrational, devoid of logic. But not here. The God I call Beyond prepared that 15 puzzle for you. I believe there is a reason Beyond had to do that. You're a detective, and to some extent, the nature of the world becomes predictable. Lord knows, as a detective myself, I'm sick of explaining to people that because I'm here, everything has meaning. Just like the arrival of a detective in a mystery novel. In a sense, Beyond is a mystery novelist. Beyond is writing a mystery novel in which you're the detective, and you should be aware of that fact. I understood his point well enough, but why do I need to know this? I told you. Because there's another Jorge Joestar. So what? You said you'd never worked a case at the same time as another detective. But you've read mystery novels where that was the case? I have. There were a lot of them these days. So? 2 detectives, 1 truth. If both are detectives, both must arrive at the same truth. But does that happen in the novels of this world? Most novels with 2 detectives have one solve it, then the other discover the real solution hidden behind it. At that point, are they both still detectives? They're treated like detectives, but certainly within that novel, the latter's the real detective, but they might switch places in the next novel, if it's a series. What I'm talking about, like I said, isn't in terms of a lifetime, but in terms of each individual case. 1 volume at a time. There is no next time. You are one of the 2 detectives. Your life will prove whether you're the real one or the fake. Man, this good-looking kid was really making everything seem like a giant pain in the ass. I was getting sick of listening to him lecture me. Fine, I'll be the fake. Whatever, your friend, this other Jorge Joestar, he could be the real one. It's cool. It won't change who I am. Why should I care? Not like being a detective's the only job I can do. There's plenty of others who can do the job instead of me, and I'm happy to leave them to it. I meant it. Murders and murder cases were hella scary. Seriously dangerous. Figuring out the tricks was a pain, and last act twists always pissed me off, and I never got off on the praise or gratitude. Man, thinking like this really made me wonder why exactly I was a detective at all. I didn't really give a damn. I just did it 'cause I was there. If there was someone else, I'd rather not. I think this rattled him, but he kept his poker face and added, "The two of you are working in parallel, but you aren't both detectives. You're both Jorge Joestars. Are you still fine with being the fake?" "Of course I am," I said. "Did I mention it? I'm adopted. You tell me I'm not Jorge Joestar? Well, I'm not." At last I cracked his poker face. "Didn't he think it weird when I gave the name?" "I just assumed 100 years from now Jorge Joestar might well be a Japanese name," he said, laughing. No, I mean some people do have weird names, but most people will still Tanaka Taro or some other super normal names. I guess your name's pretty dang weird, and that might make you less sensitive to odd names. Most modern Japanese have ordinary names with easy to read kanji." Sukumajuku sighed deeply. I don't even know anymore. I was starting to feel sorry for him. Sorry, maybe I should have played along more, but I was never a good liar. Please spare me your sympathies. Cool. Anyway, where are you staying tonight? They'll probably let you sleep at the hospital tonight, but tomorrow? You could go check out this non-triangular Bermuda Triangle. I can pay your hospital bill and travel expenses. Not like you know anyone else here. Except maybe the Katos. Nobody lived in the house in Nishiakatsuki. They might be distantly related, but distant was the key word there, and when he'd arrived he'd pretty much demolished their house. So, it might not be his fault technically, but it was hard to blame them if they had it in for him. Might be best to avoid trouble. Maybe researching their family tree might get me somewhere. Or do you want to meet with some people who might be descendants of your family? Well, I'd like to check if my luggage came with me at least, so I'd at least like to speak to the people from the demolished house briefly. I don't know if we're really related, but I suppose I could try working as a detective here a while. I don't know much about this world though, not at all sure I could be a detective here. Might be easier to just get a normal job if I need money. Yeah, well tonight just get some sleep. You'd cried a trip and nearly drowned. You must be exhausted. But I wouldn't want my things thrown out with the rubble. Don't worry about that. Serica was still reeling from the shock of it all. They're staying the night at a hotel somewhere, I'm sure. The police will have to work the scene over too, so we can go check it out tomorrow. Okay. Thank you, Jorge Joestar. Cool. If you do decide to head for the Bermuda Triangle, I'll come with. It'll be rough travelling on your own in a new world, and I'd love to see what going to another world looks like. Thanks. But I can't explain why, but I think you shouldn't come to my world. There's no telling what would happen if two Jorge Joestars met. Some sort of time travel paradox? Then I'll let him be Jorge Joestar. Whatever. I'm not the same guy as that Jorge Joestar, so how can there be a paradox? There's no telling what beyond will have in store. This again. I was starting to despise that word. Okay. I'd love to see another world, but I doubt I could survive long without the last 100 years of technology. So I'll stay on this side. Do you even have trains or jets? Getting home sounds like a pain. In our world, you can probably get there in 3 hours by airplane, Narita to JFK. The Bermuda Triangle Point was at the tip of Manhattan Island. I'll bet anything it's right where the Statue of Liberty stands. Narita? From Narita Mountain. Yeah, JFK is named after John Fitzgerald Kennedy, former president. It's an airport on Manhattan Island. Manhattan. So, America. A president who probably hasn't even been born yet in my world. The history of my world and yours might be different, so maybe he'll never exist. Right. Truth is, if this is your future, you might be better off not knowing much about it. You think so? Maybe better not to think too much about it. At this point my phone rang. It was Shirai. Hello? George, you got a minute? Yeah. Bingo, buddy. Their dreams clinched it. Already? Really? My eyes met Sukumajuku's. His eyes looked very sad. Did we have our own Javier Cortez? If there was sexual abuse going on, I was already feeling down. The second we brought up dreams, they all jumped. Shirai went on. They'd forgotten all about them till the moment we mentioned them. But every one of them described the man with a hat pulled down over his eyes. He showed up in their dreams and told every one of them the same thing. When the police arrest you, if you ask about dreams, tell them this. If Jorge Joestar ever comes to Morio, I'll kill him. He used your name, George. Everyone at a 15 said the same thing, not a syllable out of place. Like the same guy put a message in all their heads. They knew his name too. Kira Yoshikage. This is fucked up, George. Never heard the like. You'd better stay the hell away from this. Huh? Morio? Where the hell was that? Who was this guy? Who was Kira Yoshikage? Was he not just replacing Xavier Cortez as the locked room maestro, but also sending me a warning through them? Creepy. Hell no, I'm not going there, I said. Sure, I didn't buy it. Now, seriously, George, there's danger and there's danger, right? We still need your help on stuff here. Don't you dare go. I said I'm not going. And when you say that, you always go the weirdest places. He knew me pretty well by now. But man, it's like he's telling me to come. Don't! This dude can enter people's dreams. That's fucked up. Ah, but you're saying that's like waving a red flag. It's seriously dangerous. I know we deal with all kinds of weird shit on this job, but some dudes are on another level. This is definitely that other level. Beyond human comprehension. Shit like that just made me more interested. I didn't say that though. I was wound up though. Anyway, thank you, I said, and hung up. I filled Tsukumajuku in. So I basically have to go, right? Yeah, Tsukumajuku said. But I'm going to stay out of it. George and I already solved our version of the case, and I've got other things to do and think about. True enough, I supposed. Then leave this one to me, but I really will pay your bills and travel expenses. Tell you what, I'll take you to Manhattan, watch you pop through the triangle to the other world, and go to Morio. I quickly did a search for Morio on my phone. Found it. Up northeast off the coast near S-City. Never been there, never even heard of it, but someone there wanted me to stay away. Alright, this'll be fun. I'm off home. I'll swing by tomorrow, give you a phone. It'll be under my name, but give us a way to talk, I said. Tsukumajuku bowed, to my surprise. Hey now. Thank you for all your kindness. After all, we met just hours ago. It seems both Jorge Joestars are gentlemen. I truly believe there's meaning in my meeting you like this. Alright, maybe there is, but no need to get all formal. It reeks of 100-year-old manners. Over here we're more relaxed, right? My George and I were quite relaxed, I assure you. But I am grateful. I may be a burden to you for a while yet, for which I apologise. At the moment it seems I have no one else to rely on. Sure. Anyway, I'm going home. See ya. Tomorrow then. I gave him my business card and left feeling like he was a weird guy, and the way we met was weird, but somehow we'd end up being good friends. Woke up the next morning, and while I was getting dressed, word came Tsukumajuku was dead. His body was found in Morio. Shit, I thought. Someone really wanted me then. That was never a warning at all. It was always an invitation. I was going even without you killing Tsukumajuku. Shit for brains. What a waste. There was no reason for him to die. End of chapter 2.